We've got 14 people. We can probably go ahead and get started. It's 10:30 on the dot. Superintendent, do you have any updates before we kick it to Ken?
I just want to say thank you all for persevering with us on our calls. We are going to be moving into phase one the 1st of June. So we'll be putting these two once a week. And then when we move possibly into phase three or we're coming phase two onto, yes, thank you for that. And then we'll be moving into phase three. We'll put them back into our original calendar where we had it once a month. And, but because there's a lot of discussion with how schools may open and the dollars that are going to be helping in relief with COVID, I believe that the month of June then will still be that we have them once a week. We are going to have a meeting next Tuesday, and it'll be a simple agenda. And I know that's coming back after Memorial Weekend, and that'll come out into the reflections with what the agenda will be. Looking to see that it's probably going to just be a simple reflection on the task forces and having any opinions that might come from our good people that are on these calls. So with that done, we do have about 4 that are here, and I do see that Mr. Bailey, you are here with Jay, and this is the discussion on the school application and the deployment for our ESSER funds, our CARES dollars. So Ken and Jay.
Yep, Jay's on too.
Well, basically, all I'll say is, here's Jay.
You're up,
Thanks,
Jay.
Ken. So real quick, let me share my screen to you guys. So we were asked to walk you guys through the ESSER application. We're still in the development phases, but we can show you most of it here. So again, this is our e-grant system. This is what we use to distribute over $180 million of federal funds in some state that we send out to the schools. And so the ESSER funding is going to be in here. So what we'll do is we'll log into the system. So in the system here, we actually have some of the different things. You can go to reports, user tools and stuff, but the actual applications are down here in our eGrants Access Select. In this page, you'll see the way that our districts are set up is that we have what's called systems. And so within a system, you can have different members. And this one, we have an elementary and a high school. The reason they're both listed is that the elementary is actually the fiscal agent for that district. And they're the ones that submit all of the budgets, request all the cash for that at the local level. So I'm going to go in here as the elementary as the fiscal agent. We've got multiple years here we could select. So we'll go into 20. And so this page reflects all of the different grants that Great Falls currently has. They've got, the IDA, which is your B, you got your Title I, your Title II, and then of course you've got the ESSER Fund Grant and related services. Now we've actually got 2 applications for the CARES money. The ESSER Fund Grant application, that's going to be for distributing that almost $38 million, or the 90% of the $41 million, and that'll go direct to schools for the COVID. The ESSER related services grant, that's a $3 million pot of money that Elsie took out of her administrative funding to make it available for related services focused towards special education. And so when an applicant comes in here, the first thing they'll do is actually come down here, and it would actually be a create tab that you would see. But since we've already created, I'm just going to go ahead and open it. And so it's pretty simple. The way it usually works is you kind of work from left to right. So the first page that you have is just an overview page. This outlines what the program is for, purpose of the funding, the use of the funds, the grant period or the allowable time frame that those funds can be expended. This one actually, we just found this morning, needs to be updated. The grant period for these funds is going to run through September 30th of 2022 to actually obligate the funds. But OPI will give them until November 10th to liquidate it, and so we'll update that. It also reflects any pertinent legislation and then other guidance that resources that the LEAs can use for making sure they're in compliance to understand the program. Contact page, this is merely just the authorized representative. This is the person that has the authority to go in and submit and approve a budget, any cash requests, any other reporting requirements that we may have, whether it's a programmatic report or a fiscal report. And then the district clerk is the one that goes in there as the fiscal person and actually enters in all the budget information, will be the one to initiate any cash requests that they have and then submit them to the authorized rep. So in our allocations tab, this is the actual outline of the funding that they're going to receive. Here you can see that the school is going to get $1.8 million, and again, that is just the elementary itself. Underneath it, you can see that we have what's called reallocated or released money. In some of the grant programs, if a school or LEA doesn't utilize their funding, we can actually go in there and we can remove the fundings, release it, and we can reallocate it to another LEA that can use the funds in the program year. Our system also gives us the ability to do prior year funds and track that, what we call carryover, or if there's any carryover that was from the reallocated pot. And the system is good for that because a lot of our Department of Education grants actually have what's called a tidings provision, which allows a school or a grantee to spend their funding over a 2-year period. And so the system tracks that first year's worth of pot of money as it carries over to the second year. What that does, that makes sure that we as the administrating agency ensure that they carry over and spend all their own money first. And so down here in the multi-district, you'll see transfers in and transfers out. And as I spoke earlier, there's actually an elementary and a high school. Because the elementary is the fiscal agent, you'll see over here that there's a $499,000. What that is, that was the allocation that was given to the high school. And so when they submit their budget, and the elementary actually does the budget submission to include that amount, plus if they do cash request again, they'll draw down for them. Like the high school, if you look at their application, they would actually have a negative number here. And so then the bottom is just the adjusted total, which includes both the elementary and the high school's funding pot. So in total for the ESSER pot, these guys have $2,382,000 that they can spend. Okay. So we go on the program detail. First tab that comes up is what we have is called Allowable Uses. And this is language that came directly out of the CARES Act of what the LEAs can actually spend that money on. And so this is the guidance that we want to make sure that they have so that they are only doing things under these activities. So when we go in there, we do the cash request that we ensure it's actually allowable costs. Non-public tab.
No, get out.
So under this, as it's has the Title I same characteristics, it actually has what they have to do an equitable share. So a portion of their funding that they receive has to be made available for private and non-public schools. And so what this page does, it takes the total amount of the ESSER funding, and then we have a calculation that happens. And so our current guidance is that it's based on enrollment at the private and non-public schools. So in this case, we just put in there that the elementary had 25 students. The high school had 25 students for a total of 50 students within that. The system then calculates, so of the $2.3 million, $1.1 million needs to be made available to those schools for the equitable share. In the private tab over here, this is where the LEA will go in there and they will enter in the actual schools that are going to participate and receive the funding. So you have your school 1, school 2, the amount that were enrolled that we had from the first page, and then it calculates out the split based on the enrollment numbers and the total ESSER funding, and again, which ties down to the total amount of the equitable share. Okay. After they've completed that, they'll go to the budget pages. And so this is the pages where they actually go into the program. They're going to enter in how they're going to spend those monies, and it's based on what we call object codes. And so like an object code of like a 100, that would be personal services, a 200 would be fringe benefits, and this one 3 is for equipment. And so we also have what's called a purpose category, which gives us a little bit more detail as to how within that object code and what activities they're going to spend those monies on. So I'm going to jump over here just for a second on the budget summary. So for this grant, we have the remote learning technology, at-risk children and children with disabilities, wellness, professional development, facilities, meals, community collaboration, and then another category, and then non-public. And so each time they go into each one of these object codes, they'll select that purpose code that applies to how those funds are going to be spent. Okay. Once they've completed, they'll do all their lines. The system actually will calculate in total. If they have indirects, it takes that into account, but it will show them that how much of their allocation. They have to make sure that this comes down to 0 before this page will actually go forward. So it has check systems in it. So again, once they're done with completing it, then they'll have an actual summary of how those funds are going to be built. I just did this quickly and just put it under one object code, kind of large. Here you can see this is the amount that they were awarded net of the equitable services component. And then down here, this is how the budgeted to spend the non-public portion that's going to go out to the private and non-publics. It'll give you the total of each one of the categories. And then of course the total for the total funding source. Okay. Once they've completed their budget, they'll go over to what we call our assurances tab. This is where the grantees have to attest that they will comply with all applicable federal or state regulations. And so this tab is what we call common assurances. And these are assurances that or regulations that apply pretty much to all federal grants. And so they go in and we keep this consistent with every one of our applications that are kind of the same thing. If the program has other specific things that they have to attest to, then we'll put that in here. In our application, we've asked the schools, one to give us two things. One, just to tell us how they're going to describe how the activities with the Allowable Uses, use the funds to support. And then also if there's anything that OPI can provide in terms of technical assistance, which helps us get a better grasp of what type of outreach we need to do at the local level. Okay. There are what they call GEPA assurances, which is the General Education Provisions Act. And these ones are a little bit more specific to where they need to attest to actually provide a narrative of how they're going to ensure they give equitable access and participation with the CARES dollars for students and teachers, focusing on gender, race, national origin, disability, or age. And then again, just some other more specific GEPA, more fiscal and internal controls type assurances. And this page here just shows that they've went in there, they have actually attested and agreed to that they will meet the requirements. Once they've done all these, it'll show all done. It'll give us an actual date. The one nice thing about the system itself is that the common assurances are already checked, because if they've already got a grant application and another grant, they've agreed to those assurances, they don't have to go in and redo it. It just automatically checks it for them because the applications actually are linked. And so through the process, in the event that they have to do any type of amendment, they can come in here and they can submit an amendment if they want to do a budget realignment or something of that nature. And then we have a submit. So once the authorized rep comes into the application, they'll run a consistency check. Once that goes, a little submit button will come up and it'll allow it to submit it to OPI for review and approval. And then we have an application history tab that as you actually submit it, if you do amendments or anything like that, it'll just show you when it was submitted or approved, and just any changes in there. And then they can actually print an application as well. So also in the system, like I said, it's also used for cash requests. And I don't have any set up, so I'm going to go into Title II just to show you the payments. So this would be a summary page again of what they were actually appropriated. This one under the adult basic education, they actually have 3 different funding pots. It's a consolidated type application. And so it tracks each one of those separately, which is nice for us when we're thinking about reporting or just making sure each pot of money is expended. So if they want to do a request, they can come in here and select the program. So this shows that they've done previous ones when they were created, submitted, when they're approved. If they want to go ahead and do one, they can create a new request. When they do a request, it looks very similar to the budget pages. Hold on here, sorry. I think my system, oh, sorry, I got to select one. There we go. So exactly like the budget page where they go in and they'll select the object code of where they're going to expend those monies. This one, the 100 is, again, the personal services. And so they put in there that it's for instructional salaries. They'll put in the amount of the request that they'd like. They've also got the fringe benefits component, which we usually say is budget about 20% of what their personal services should be. And this would be the total amount of the request that they're going to submit and would have received. Okay. And again, the system can also be used for expenditure reports. So if once we get to the end of the grant, OPI requires that all grantees submit a final expenditure report so we can verify that all the funds were expended as expected. So that's a pretty quick one. The related services one will be exactly the same. The only difference between on the related services is we're going to have co-ops included in this group, and so co-ops will actually log in. They don't actually have a budget page when they come in here. They won't see the budget pages. It's more they just have to accept the money and state that they're going to participate in the grant. And so those member applications get sent to the fiscal agent, and then the fiscal agent for that co-op is the one that would go in and basically, again, do the same thing and budget all the funding, request the dollars, do all the reporting, and all the same as that. Initially, we kind of had this set up where we were going to do what they call a consolidated application, kind of like the ESEAs, where you can have multiple types of funding in there. But because of the co-ops, we weren't able to get it to go to the proper approval people, so we had to break it out into 2 applications, which once we designed the first one, it's part of the reason why we're extended out a little further than we wanted, is we had to go in and redevelop these. So with that, I'll pause, and if you guys answer any questions you guys may have about the system or the process.
Thanks, Jay. Really appreciate that overview. Are there any questions or comments for Jay?
Thank you. The purpose of having our expert, Jay, with Ken work on this is so that you understand that and many of you that are here do understand that. But there is validation, there is verification of these dollars, that they are being spent, their assurances and everything that are here. The OPI had to work with a vendor to do some amendments and some enhancements to our existing e-grant system to be able to allow this very large pot of dollars to be able to flow to our schools. Very meaningful, very thoughtful, and also reflective on what the dollars can be used for. So there will be some opportunity for us to go back into this system and see what those dollars were spent for, so that we can learn what the COVID care dollars were given and how they were given, and then the student success that came out of that. So Jay, thank you very much for this. I appreciate it was a very weedy discussion for many that may not understand this, but just want everybody to know that we at the OPI here and the experts, especially with Jay and Ken and that unit, are putting everything that they can in to make sure that it's transparent, that it's validated, and that it is very meaningful for our schools. So thank you very much, Jay.
And Nancy, I'm sorry, Elsie, got one more thing. You talk about accountability. One of the things the system also allows is that when we have a cash request come in, if we want to have them submit invoices or any type of supporting documentation, the system also allows them to upload documents for review. And so if there's any instance where we think there's an unallowable cost, we ask for the support. And then also, we're hoping to have this open mid next week, available for schools to go ahead and start going in and presenting applications. Because of fiscal year end, there will be some timing issues with actually making the first distribution, but we'll be able to make it one in July without any issue. So.
Thank you, Jay.
It's great. So our next topic is moving into phase 2 of the COVID response on June 1st. So just some high-level information. The directives that are related to schools have been outside of these phased-in approaches, so it doesn't directly, moving into phase 2 doesn't impact the way that local districts are operating, but it does impact us at the state level, how we're operating as an agency. So we expect to receive DOA guidance, Department of Administration guidance next week for state agencies. At this time, even though we are moving into phase 2, the OPI still does not have any plans to do large-scale conferences this summer. Those are still, some have been canceled and some have been postponed. And at this time, we don't plan on doing any direct travel out to districts this summer. Of course, all of our specialists in the agency are supporting schools on a daily basis remotely, and they will continue to do that. But at this time, we do not have any plan to resume large-scale conferences or travel out to districts. So does anyone want to comment on phase 2, how it might affect how you're serving schools, or McCall, anything that I might have missed?
Would you like to take my seat?
Nope, I don't think anything on my end that you've mentioned. But, as always, happy to answer questions if folks have them, generally.
Thanks. Well, if there's nothing else on that, that was pretty short and sweet. It is probably welcome news for some of our bigger districts for graduation ceremonies. Keeping in mind, you still aren't supposed to have gatherings above 50 people. With that, I think we'll move into Cheryl and Julie had our first task force meeting yesterday with the Montana Flex 2020 task force. We've got the Montana Learn task force this afternoon. So I'll just have Cheryl give a recap of how yesterday went, or Julie if she's on the line. I don't know who's going first.
Yeah, I think Julie's here and would just like to thank folks that participated yesterday and Julie Mergel for her skilled facilitation of the group. We had about 33 people that participated in the task force yesterday. So Julie, over to you to update what was a fabulous hour yesterday.
Thanks, Cheryl. And yes, I just put in the chat box the link to the information on the webpage so that folks can go there and see that. And so yesterday we did launch the Flex 20 task force. And really the current state and federal policy environment that we have was built to service a more traditional model. And so the purpose of this task force is to take a look at how the COVID pandemic has highlighted the various forms of friction between what educators need to enable and empower continuity of learning and what policy encourages or allows. And so the flexibilities provide relief from state and federal policies and regulations that put up barriers. And these flexibilities allow students to keep on learning and educators to think, rethink, and transform education, drive meaningful change, build capacity, and support student health and well-being. And so that's really kind of the essence of this flexibility task force, is really taking a look at those flexibilities and in particular, which ones promote opportunities for student success. Also to give us an opportunity to clarify and communicate existing policy flexibilities that are already in place that people may not know about or not using. And really to consider potential waivers in key policy areas to enhance learning experiences as we look at our schools coming back. So that's really the purpose of the Flex 20 task force. And yesterday we did have a successful meeting and kind of launched our meeting. We were able to kind of outline with that working group the purpose, the process we'll use in the task force, and the deliverables that are expected from that task force. And we then kind of outlined those next steps. And so the key deliverables for this group after 3 sessions is to really, under 5 different focus areas, is to create a list of recommendations to the superintendent of public instruction for immediate consideration and rapid response. And so we will be keeping all of our communication, the minutes, the recordings, the agendas, any resources that we're using in our task force available there on that website that we've shared. But it was a great first session where we kind of dug in, launched, and we look forward to continuing the conversation and communicating out what the task force comes up with. So thank you, Cheryl.
Julie.
Thanks, Julie. So at that same website, you'll find information as well about the Montana Learn Task Force, which is, they're having their first meeting at 1 o'clock this afternoon. I'm very thankful to Colette and her Content Standards and Instruction Division. Similarly to Julie, Colette and her staff will be helping facilitate the Montana Learn Task Force, which is going to be geared more towards parents, students, and teachers, and what we need to do to provide more flexibility, resources, and support around teaching and learning in this new environment. So again, that link there has information on both task forces. Our primary discussion point next Tuesday, for those that are able to join, is going to be digging into those task forces a little bit more after both of them have had a chance to meet once and staff have had a chance to digest the information that's come out of those first meetings. Any questions or comments about the task forces? Great. Well, we don't have anything else on the agenda. I do know I was emailing Chris Thatcher and Pete this morning about the provisional licenses. Pete, do you want to give any updates that Kirk or Dennis could share to their audiences about the provisional license updates?
I guess I have I'm not quite sure what you're talking about. Are you talking about the class 5?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, the
Sorry,
board.
I may have misspoke, but yeah, what you and Chris were talking about the updates this morning.
Okay, yeah, the Board of Public Ed granted a 1-year extension for class 5, and the deans were talking today about a little bit about the 1-year extension for folks that are in internships with the university program. So that was really all that was talked about, as well as I asked Chris about getting information out to the schools, because during one of the task force meetings yesterday, there was one individual that wasn't aware that the class 5 had been extended, because the superintendent said that he wasn't aware, he was having difficulty with getting one of his people licensed, and that their class 5 had expired. And that's when I informed them that there had been a 1-year extension granted by the Board of Public Ed at the request of the superintendent. So I just
we're going to share that information out again. So just making sure if you have newsletters that are going out to your audiences that are school administrators, to get that information out to them as well. Is there anything else for the good of the order, or any other updates that members have here? Right, Superintendent, do you have any other updates or?
It's kind of like a dance here.
Yep.
In our Zoom classroom, it's kind of like a dance. Thank you all. I know we're coming and embarking on a holiday with Memorial Day. All travel safe, all stay well. And again, we will come back to this on Tuesday with a little bit more depth, knowledge, and understanding with the task forces as they unroll. With all of that, thank you for everything you do for our students. And as graduation is upon us, let's give a big shout out to the 2020 graduating class of this year. Thank you so much for all, and stay well.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone.